Hey, what's up guys, Metal571 here, and today I want to talk about the AKG K240 DF. This is an interesting, rare, difficult to find headphone, and I think it's something that's really special. Alright, so what was the original purpose of this? This is actually more of a reference headphone than anything else. It's a specially tuned version of the K240 monitor, essentially, to adhere to German radio standards, the IRT standards of a diffuse field headphone response. And I will discuss how well it meets that. I'm not familiar exactly with the full standard, but I will tell you that it is a very neutral sounding headphone, at least in the mids and the treble. Get into more detail about that in a second. First, I want to talk about the hardware. As you probably saw in my K240 Studio review, if you watched that, this is a very similar looking headphone, very similar build quality, that kind of a thing. You've got the automatically adjusting headband, the usual AKG thing. You've got the usual K240 style ear cups that I said were just barely large enough. And they're still that way, although it is worth noting that on this model, the padding is quite a bit more than I noticed on either my Studio or the pads that come with the K271 Mark II, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm not sure if that's a normal thing for the vintage K240s, but it was quite welcome, and makes my ears quite a bit more comfortable in here. Other than that, build quality is about as solid as it can be for a K240. The cable on the DF is not removable, so that's worth noting. If you had to replace it, you'd probably have to resolder something. It's quite long. It's something like the usual, maybe it's a little bit shorter than 10 feet. I mean, you can look up the specs. It's not hard to find. It's terminated in a 3.5 millimeter jack with a screw-on adapter included. It's worth noting for some reason that my quarter-inch jack kind of fell apart. What is going on here? I mean, I bought this thing in like new condition on eBay, but I have no idea what that's all about. That actually got stuck in my headphone amplifier for a little bit and scared me a little. So you may want to inspect your quarter-inch adapter if you do actually pick one of these up. I don't know why that happened to mine, but it's just something that had happened to me in that regard. Okay, so now that we have the build quality down and the hardware design, which is, classic K240, this is it should be noted this is a semi-open reference headphone as far as the sound goes. You're getting a little bit of isolation, and you're getting a little bit of reduction of leak, but not much. Kind of like the Studio model. The only thing you're really going to attenuate here when you put this on versus taking it off is a little bit of the treble gets isolated from the leak. But that's about it. You're really not isolating much else. So when they say semi-open, I would say something more like mostly open. Okay, now let's talk about the sound. This is something that I think few people have heard this headphone, and I may be one of the only people at the time of recording this of actually talking in depth about the DF on YouTube. So I'm going to try to describe it best I can. So the bass, actually, you know what? Before I even get into describing what this sounds like, I need to talk about the impedance. This is a 600 ohm headphone, and not only is it 600 ohms, but it is very hard to drive. This is not a headphone that you're going to want to buy if you don't have a headphone amplifier. I'm going to say that again. Do not buy this headphone without a fairly beefy amplifier. I have a Magni 2 and a Modi 1, and whereas I listen to the K701 somewhere between a quarter volume and half volume, this I listen to between half volume and sometimes up to max volume on things like classical tracks and whatnot. This needs serious power. I would even go as far as to saying you need something on the level of a Magnitude Uber to really power this thing with enough headroom on tap for louder listening levels. It is very hungry when it comes to amplifiers. So that is something that is important. If you plug this into a phone, you're barely at max volume on the phone. You're barely going to get something that's somewhere between like low audible and like barely a medium listening level, and that's with max volume on phones with fairly powerful amplifiers. So yeah, not a mobile headphone. Leaks like crazy, takes huge amounts of power. Now, with that out of the way, the bass. Let's talk about the bass on this headphone. Yes, it is notoriously light, and it really does sound that way. The bass on this headphone is even lighter than the K701. This can be a massive deal breaker for many people, and I need to mention it for that reason. It's like I think the bass is kind of like, it starts rolling off pretty early, and it just keeps rolling off way down there. And the impact is very minimal, very light. You really need like EDM to get the drivers moving in this thing. It's the bass is there, but as opposed to being barely there in the K701, it's like really barely there in this guy. On rock and like more mid-rangey mastering genres, it's really behind there. It's really in the background. It's probably the largest flaw of this headphone. Other than the lightness of the bass, the extension does exist. It's there, like I said, barely there. And also, the speed of it is very high. That just kind of is a theme with this headphone. It is super fast. The driver is ultra light, 600 ohm, but requires a lot of power. So the bass is quite velvety, very smooth, but very quiet. It's there. It's not completely missing. The extension exists, but it's super light in impact. All right, so the mid-range. This is probably the best mid-range I have ever heard on a headphone. Let me say that again. This is the best mid-range I've heard. It really does remind me a lot of the HD 600, and a lot of other people have said the same thing. I would happen to agree. It is very difficult for me to find a headphone that works with pretty much any genre when it comes to the mid-range. Usually, I'll have headphones work great for electronic music, and then the mids will ring like crazy, and the metal distortion in heavier metal tracks will sound terrible and very upfront and distracting and harsh. This nails everything I could possibly throw at it when it comes to the mid-range. The mids are organic, they're highly detailed, they're super fast, and they sound super neutral. Very, very impressive. None of that 2K bump in the 701, and way faster than the modern 55 ohm low Z driver in the Studio and Mark II models. It is spectacular mid-range, just absolutely amazing. So the treble. This is kind of like a love-hate relationship on the treble. The treble is super fast. Again, very extended. I find it more detailed than the K701. Not surprisingly, since the speed and the very fast decay is really exceptional and brings forth tiny, tiny details that sometimes I even miss when listening with the 701. It's a very analytical headphone. That said, there seems to be a prominent, I'm thinking it's ringing. It sounds like a ringing edge at around 6K. So there's a sibilance region spike or ringing region here somewhere in the low treble. It's there. It's not very distracting, but it exists. It could be that, and you see this on even measurements of the HD800, I'm starting to think that diffuse field equalized headphones have a target that actually includes a bump. It's around 6K, so maybe that's why that's there. I don't know. I haven't heard the sextet. It might be voiced similarly in the treble, but that's what it is. The treble's very extended. Again, just beautiful, super lush, smooth, but there's a little bit of that 6K low treble sibilant spike in there somewhere. So that's there. And that's it as far as the frequency response and ringing edges and speed problems go, which are very minimal in this headphone. Very minimal. Definitely the fastest headphone I've heard and reviewed so far. And the Soundstage is also the best Soundstage I've heard so far as well. It has a great center image, very nice wide left and right images, and a very nice sense of space. So it's actually quite a bit better than the K701. When you wear this headphone for a while, and then you switch to the K701, for example, 701 sounds real distant and kind of like super wide, and then you lose some of that center image. This thing's got the whole around the head image going. It's very precise. The imaging's much better, and it's fantastic. I think that was part of the IRT standard that they tried to adhere to. This headphone was basically designed to sound like studio monitor speakers in a mixing studio. That was what it was really intended to be, a replacement where you absolutely must mix and master on headphones. I'd say they got that quite right, except I don't know what's going on with the bass being so light with this. Other than that, very, very impressive. And that's it. So these are tough to find. I would search eBay. I would search the HeadFi classifieds, I guess, if you will, if you really want to grab one. They are definitely a niche headphone, not for everybody, and are a tuned K240 monitor. Again, if you want more bass, I would think the monitor has quite a bit more, judging by some measurements I've seen, but the same 600 ohm fast driver, just beautiful. Like, this is a completely different class from the modern K240s. So thanks, guys. Hope this helps, and the DF is a classic that I think I'll keep around for a while myself, if anything as a collector's item, as it is quite difficult to find. They are, of course, made in Austria. All right, stay tuned for more headphone reviews, and now that I've got this microphone and the interface going on, I can start recording guitar covers again. So expect to see some of those might be coming back soon as well. Till next time, take care.